Good morning, everyone. It is wonderful to be here. And of course, Dan Poneman and John Wagner are a tough act to follow. But I am really looking forward to perhaps doing a bit of a deeper dive on some of the threads that they introduced. And I'm delighted to introduce our panelists. Maria Korsnick is President and Chief Executive Officer of the Nuclear Energy Institute. Rafael Kasparov is Chief Executive Officer of Orlen Synthos Green Energy. Sungyol Lim is Senior Vice President of Korea Hydro and Nuclear Power Company. And Shinando Basu is the Director of Power at the Rockefeller Foundation. So, Maria, let's dive right in. John and Dan spoke a little bit about the four executive orders, and it's been just over a year since President Trump signed those executive orders on nuclear energy, creating a roadmap for nuclear deployment. What are some of the tangible results that we've seen as government and industry have worked together to implement that roadmap?
Well, thanks, Jennifer. My goodness, what a difference a year makes. Yeah, it has absolutely been a large focus and I'd say action focused for nuclear. So, maybe just at a high level, some of the executive orders had to do with regulation. And so, there's been a significant focus on the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. They've shown tangible, measured improvements. We can highlight those in a few minutes. In addition, there was interest in bringing some reactors critical by July 4th of this year. And I think you heard in John Wagner's discussion some details around that. And I think there's 10 companies that are actually going for it. One already went critical, and there's a few more in the pipeline. And I'll be honest, whether or not they make to the July 4th date or not, you can imagine that's just an impressive goal. The idea is to just have momentum, right? Move forward and make progress. In fact, I know some companies that said, I'm more interested in getting my whole reactor and my power plant built. I'm not going for criticality by July 4th, but they're still very much in the race. And so that's the reactor pilot program. I would say it's up and running, very healthy. Well, what happens when the pilot program ends? Well, they started the launch pad, the launch pad program, and that's going to be the follow-on from the reactor pilot program. Also in the executive orders, there was 10 large reactors listed, and there's been lots of conversation, lots of progress, some announcements. You heard maybe from Department of Energy and others talking about placing long lead item order. I do expect maybe in the next months ahead, perhaps we'll hear a little bit more about that. And so, really sweeping changes that we have seen significant progress on. So, what it tells you is those executive orders weren't just words on paper. They were really intended to push, and they have pushed across the board. I've talked a lot about the private sector, but the government itself was involved. So you've seen the Army make announcements about things they're doing on microreactors, the Navy talking about trying to get onshore power from some of their reactors as well, and Air Force as well. I think they made announcements with Westinghouse, Antares, and Radiant. And so, you're really seeing significant progress. And so, what's the what of that? Well, the private sector, the investment sector, they're really taking notice of this, right? They're taking notice of the level of innovation and progress that's being made. And part of that is supported by what I mentioned before, the regulatory progress. In the past, really, we had regulation that was written for large light water reactors. And so, yes, you could license things that weren't that, but it was arduous. The regulation, you needed to take exceptions or make other things happen because it sort of wasn't natural. And that's changed now, right? Part 53 has made it through the rulemaking process. That's non-light water reactor technology. And Part 57 is in its final comment phase now. Part 57 geared more towards the smaller microreactors. So it's not just that the innovation is happening. It's not just that new things are being invented. It's that the regulation is keeping up with that, and you're able to take those great ideas and commercialize them. So lots of good stuff happening.
Maria, thank you so much. What an excellent overview of everything that's happened in the last year, especially on domestic U.S. nuclear energy policy. And I think one of the things that we try to emphasize here at the Atlantic Council is the importance of the domestic nuclear energy policy landscape and then how that relates to international civil nuclear cooperation. And we try to really draw a line between the domestic and the international. So, Rafael, I'm so pleased to go to you. Please give us a bit of an update on the Poland SMR project and what are some of the milestones you've achieved since you were here last year, and what are you looking forward to?
Thank you, Jennifer. Good morning. So first, SGE is European platform for BWX 300 development. We not do things only in Poland. We are present in several European countries, and this is what we do. We try to create products, licensing, environmental impact assessments, standard design for several countries. So we build a scale, we build ability for repetition, for standardization, and because we invested in standard design together with TVA, OPG, and G Hitachi in 2022, we already are ready to deploy and provide license to construct for Polish regulator and also in other countries. So we're planning to do this next year. Poland is first on our map, but not only. And with important milestones, we almost completed preliminary safety analysis report. We're ready with the 50 hertz. So the European Code and Standards we signed in February this year, FEED agreement with G Hitachi. So we do Polish design for generic power plant with BWX 300. We go forward. I think also it's important that we ready to submit application for contract for differences in European Union. We have such strange instrument in Europe, which replace let's say PPAs or other form of bankability. It's government European Union granted agreement called contract for differences, and we're going to apply next week for contract for differences for the fleet of reactors in Poland, 14 units.
Amazing. And first of all, I love that you're thinking about this regionally. I feel like every time I'm in Central and Eastern Europe, whether it's Poland, whether it's anywhere else, I was just in Croatia in April, you're always the talk of the town. And I also really love that you're thinking about this on a fleet scale level rather than ones and twos, which I think is just so important. Sanyal, I'd like to go to you. If you recall, about a year ago exactly, I had the privilege of going to visit Seoul nuclear power plant, which was just absolutely incredible. Um, Give us a sense right now of KHNP's nuclear energy priorities in the Republic of Korea.
Okay, thank you for the question, Jennifer. And Seoul is a very unique place. There are 4 units of nuclear power plant. 2 is under operational, 1 is under commissioning, and 1 is on the final stage of the construction. And you can see what's going on in Korea for the nuclear business and what's behind the miracle of the Desert Baraka project. Because Unit 1 and 2 is the reference plant for the Baraka project. And it is very close to the biggest Korean harbor city, Busan. So you can enjoy Korean cuisine there. If you haven't, that's a good excuse for your second visit. Going back to your question, so Korean government, like 10 years ago, was not really anti-nuclear, but unfriendly to nuclear. But now the sentiment in government is changing. Like any other countries in Europe, some countries abandoning nuclear power, but now they are back to the game. And in US, of course, there's a bipartisan support for the nuclear project. Korean industry has 2 unique characteristics. First is it's really focusing on manufacturing, like semiconductors, Samsung Electronics, and SK Hynix, and shipbuilding, and automobile, and chemicals, and refineries. So those industries consumes a lot of electricity. And second, Korea is very much export driven. So that means those products should have cost competitiveness. And of course, the price of the electricity means a lot to those outcomes. So this government, in line with any other countries, realized that nuclear power is a must to go. And so we, Korean government, announced every 2 years electricity supply and demand plan. And the 11th plan was finalized last year, and it includes 2 large-scale nuclear power plant and 1 SMR. That doesn't mean a lot compared to US, 10 units by 2030, but the demand of the electricity of Korea is 1/10 of US. So this is a lot. And the portion of the electricity from the nuclear will increase from 30% to 35%. So that's a big increase. And other than that, Korean government is also focusing on developing SMR. We have our own SMR model, which is ISMR, Innovative SMR. We are kind of behind the other front runners like NuScale or TerraPower or X Energy. But still, our government is believing that the success story that we got from large scale can be applied to this SMR. We have a very strong supply chain, and we have strong leadership in project management, which is mainly on KHMP. So the government is trying to online ISMR on mid-2030s. Another focus of the government is exporting our technology. We signed a contract with Republic of Czech Republic last year, and we are trying our best to award a following deal in Temelin, Czech Republic. So that's main goal in nuclear business in Korea. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think it's really so important in the US. Obviously, we keep an eye closely on our own domestic nuclear energy policy, but also very important for us to closely follow domestic nuclear energy policy in the countries of our partners and allies around the world. And Sung-yul, as you know, as much as I also love visiting nuclear power plants in Korea, I love the cuisine as well. Shenando, I want to go to you, and I believe this is your first Global Energy Forum with the Atlantic Council, so welcome. And it's also only fairly recently that the Rockefeller Foundation has started to take a serious look at the potential for nuclear energy to deliver reliable, affordable, and clean power to developing economies. And you worked on a major report at the end of last year on the role of nuclear energy. So why is it that you've started looking so seriously at nuclear energy in such an in-depth way?
Thank you, Jennifer. Yeah, and it's really wonderful to be here. So let me answer this in a couple of parts here. So first of all, why philanthropy, and then secondly, why RF, right? So nuclear energy, as many of you know, versus or as compared to other sources of energy, requires a lot more coordination from a very diverse set of players, right? And so you need coordination from governments, policymakers, technical experts, private sector, et cetera. And so philanthropy is, as a sector, uniquely positioned to convene all of those different players from all of these places, right, as a neutral party. The second is YRF. And so let me start by saying that everything that we are doing out of the power portfolio at the Rockefeller Foundation is centered around universal energy abundance. Universal energy abundance being the notion that populations all around the world deserve access to energy cheaply, affordably, universally, right? Version of this would be energy dominance, which we've been hearing a lot about here, of course. But it's really another version of that, right? And so we believe that nuclear energy really has the ability to deliver a step change in the availability of electricity, right? I just got back from Kigali, where they had a nuclear energy conference, a nuclear energy innovation summit for Africa. And one of the biggest things that I heard there was that a lot of these African countries are seeing nuclear energy as a major enabler of industrialization, right? These countries want to be able to process their minerals locally. They want to build data centers. They want to have the ability for sovereign AI. They want to be able to build out, petchem facilities, aluminum smelters, all of these things, and these all require energy and specifically baseload energy, something that just wind, solar, and batteries right now, just given the technological limitations, cannot deliver on. So let me tie this back to your report, the report that you brought up earlier. And yeah, this is something that we were all very proud of coming out of Rockefeller last November. And one of the things that the report was very careful to point out was that wind solar batteries are actually complementary to nuclear, right? When you have stable, non-emitting baseload generation, not only is that better for energy systems as a whole because it guarantees reliability and a whole host of other benefits, but it improves capacity factors for renewables. And so for the philanthropic sector especially, many players have been resistant to nuclear and they've been very pro renewables, and that's fine and that's great, and we should continue supporting wind and solar and batteries. But nuclear is important because all of those types of assets stand to benefit significantly when you have stable baseload generation.
That's just absolutely incredible. Thank you so much for that overview, and couldn't agree more. Both in terms of everyone deserving the right to access affordable, reliable power, and also nuclear energy complementing other energy sources as well. Maria, I'd like to go back to you. You mentioned and talked a little bit about the regulatory space. Um, and obviously, a lot is changing rapidly in that space over the last year and continuing to change. Um, in your opinion, is nuclear regulation happening too slowly, too quickly? Is it just right? And do we currently have the tools that we need to license new designs?
Great, thanks, Jennifer. We talked about the executive orders. One of those executive orders talked about a wholesale revision at the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. And just to, maybe kind of put some context around that, they're going to do 28 rulemakings this year. Typically, a rulemaking in the past would take a few years, probably 3, maybe even 4 years. We're going to do 28 rulemakings in the span of this year. They'd like them finalized for the most part by the end of the year. Likely some of that's going to go into the beginning of next year. This is affecting about 10,000 pages of regulation. So I just wanted to give people a view of just how large, how massive that this is. And so on one hand, you'd say, oh my gosh, right? How can you even do that? Well, they've broken it down into these 28 steps. And we are very much engaged as soon as one of these rulemakings come out. We're obviously going quickly through it and getting it out to our membership. We have about 300 members that span the entire value chain for nuclear. So we can get kind of a quick read on the good, bads, and uglies of whatever the challenges are and provide that feedback on behalf of the whole industry to the NRC. So I can tell you we're very intimate with these regulatory changes and we've been very busy on this final side of that, I would say, and we're very pleased. And so the NRC staff is working very, very hard, but we're really appreciative of what they're producing. So I would say, again, and we're right in the thick of it, but the standard for safety remains very high. And there are ways to make things more efficient. An example of that, and we submitted a paper to them a year ago on how to take about a 5-year process and turn it into about a 6-month process. And lo and behold, Part 57 recently came out for comment, and it does just that. So it's really made for the micro reactor or say, smaller size reactors. And in under 6 months, you should be able to license something like that, given that it meets all the different criteria. And I'm not going to go into all of those details. There's, of course, a lot of caveats that you have to meet. I just want you to feel how fundamentally different that it is right now, to say that they've gone through a culture change and that the staff is sort of very aligned and very much on board, that being efficient is part of the equation. And I think they're doing a really good job. So we're about, I want to say, maybe halfway through ish of the total number of rulemakings. and really like what we're seeing. Now, we're not waiting for everything to be done. Already you see fantastic data points, right? Kairos Power, X Energy, Terra Power, all have seen products, whether those are construction permits or license reviews, all ahead of schedule. And on the current fleet, there was a subsequent license renewal, meaning a license renewal taking that plant from 60 years to 80 years of operation. It was the Duke plant, Robinson Unit 2, and that was completed in 12 months. And the standard prior to that had been 18 months. And so already you're seeing tangible results, things happening ahead of schedule, 3 months ahead of schedule, 9 months ahead of schedule, really significant improvements. And so I think, again, as I mentioned, yeah, we could have licensed a non-light water reactor with the regulation the NRC had 4 or 5 years ago, but it was cumbersome. And now they're putting things in place that make it much easier. It's much more appropriate and applicable to the problem statement that you're looking at. And so I couldn't be, say, more proud of the NRC staff in terms of the volume of work that they're doing, the attention that they're paying to it, and then likewise to the industry, very quickly providing comments. We have about a 30-day turnaround for most of these. Sometimes we get 45 days on these. So the whole engine is going very quickly, but very pleased with the results.
Maria, thank you so much. And I think, as you said, so important to emphasize that efficiency and safety can both help each other. And so, what's efficient can be more safe, and what's safe can be more efficient. Rafael, we've talked a lot about de risking new nuclear projects. How are you thinking through the financing issues around your projects?
So, first, the most important thing is that the mechanism to organize bankability of the project in European Union is based on the contract for differences, which I mentioned before. They granted by the government with the notification of European Union. They set up a price, a strike price, for 60 years. So that's a fundament for the project bankability. As a private organization, we finance our stage of development of the project with the private equity. But for the long term, the construction phase, we need to have a contract for differences granted. So the risking project is mostly based on the government grantees, the price and offtake coming from CFD's mechanism. That's the first thing. Second, I would say prices are our best opportunity. We have highest natural gas prices in the world, in Poland. We have highest prices of electricity. So if we will be able to deliver base load, let's say in the average price around 130 euros per megawatt hour, we're still much below current energy prices in Poland. And I'm not even mentioning increase of consumption with AI data center electrification. I'm talking about the replacement of the baseload for next 1 or 2 decades, which is required in Poland and other Central European countries. So these mechanisms, they, let's say, push us the safety and the green part of the financing. The risking project, I think that's very important also. It will also come with the nuclear liability solution, which is CNC convention required by the United States. And we already applied to European Union, Polish government to become the part of this convention.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much for that overview. Sungyol, we talk a lot about the need to strengthen the nuclear supply chain and the industrial base, especially in the United States. How can KHNP and Korea's nuclear industry help with these efforts?
Okay, thank you for the question. I don't need to repeat the executive order, and I knew it, but I witnessed that Maria is the strongest driving force behind nuclear new build in US. But still, there are some things that should be breakthrough in US, which is supply chain issue. And I found that according to the NSI report, the number of the US nuclear component suppliers has declined by more than 80% since the late 1980s, and the number of companies holding ASME N-type certifications has also decreased by more than 78%. So after the TMI accident, and maybe, of course, there's a recent nuclear new build project, but I think not many people are witnessing some success story in that. So that's the reason of this declining as supply chain. But contrast to that, in Korea, we built the construction of the first nuclear power plant in 1971 when the Starbucks opened the first cafe at Seattle on that year. So, but without any serious interruption, we built nuclear power plant again and again and again. So we have a very strong and sound supply chain of almost 1,000 companies. And in Korea, we can most of the component, almost 100% can be made in Korea. But I think maybe like in 10 years, in some ways, I hope not, but the landscape in US and Korea will be opposite because, Korea is not big country like US. The size of the Korea is almost the half size of the average US state. But we already have 26 units up and running and more are coming. So I don't think there are not many rooms for the nuclear new build. But in US, of course, we are expecting a nuclear boom. So there's a gap between US and Korea, but that should be filled with some kind of bridge strategy. I want to call it reverse localization, step-by-step approach. Until now, as far as I know, like ultra scale forging and some kind of welding and major equipment and heat treatment is not possible in US, but it is done by mostly design and ability and many manufacturing companies in Korea. But those kind of capabilities can be transferred to US, maybe through some kind of JV or M&A or things like that. And we should give a serious thought on it. And one good story is that Secretary Rotnik and Minister Kim Jong-un of Korea mentioned that this 20 billion US dollar investment could be utilized in nuclear projects. So I think utilizing those capital, we can restore the capability in US about the supply chain issue. And we, KHMP, has strong supply chain and very close relationship with the supply chain. So we can cooperate with US about supply chain issues.
Thank you so much. Such a fascinating notion of the reverse localization, and I think we'll all be watching to see if some of the mechanisms that you mentioned, like JVs and M&As, come to pass. So really fascinating. Shenando, I'd like to go back to you. What do you see as some of the most significant challenges to nuclear energy deployment in developing economies?
So yeah, having been at the nuclear energy summit in Africa last week, I think the thing that came up again and again over the days was the cost of capital. That is by far the biggest challenge for financing any sort of future asset, right? The cost of capital is expected to make up at least 60 to 70% of any future nuclear project in really any of these middle income countries. Now, that being said, yeah, I mean, some of these African countries, like Ghana, especially, which is quite advanced, about halfway through phase 2 of the IAEA milestones process, they remain very serious about wanting to hopefully build a nuclear asset sometime in the next decade. But in order for them to really make this a reality, Unlocking financing from the MDBs is going to be essential. We've seen the World Bank, of course, lift their ban. And so I think right now it's mostly a waiting game. It's not really a question of if, but rather when the other MDBs will follow and hopefully open up the doors for nuclear finance. This is going to be a major issue. The second, I would say, most important thing that is also happening in parallel is all of the ecosystems building and systems enablement. And that is exactly what we are hoping to do from the philanthropy side, like I was saying before, around convening all these stakeholders together so that we can make sure that we have the right sort of regulatory frameworks in place, that we can facilitate building trade agreements, facilitate even technology sharing from countries like yours and Poland, right? These are exactly the sorts of things that we want to help facilitate so that when it does come time to actually, say, maybe commission a test reactor in 7, 8, or 9 years, maybe, that all of those other pieces are ready to go.
Thank you so much. And also, we're keeping a close eye on all of these issues as well. And hoping that all the right people get into the right rooms and deal with the issues that you've just addressed. Maria, you mentioned the reactor pilot program, and of course, John Wagner did as well. And last week, we saw the Antares reactor go critical at Idaho National Laboratory. What are some of the other developments that you are watching, and what will indicate to you that the industry is on the right path to rapid and at-scale deployment?
Yeah, thanks. Actually, I'd like to build off a couple of comments that I heard both of you just say, and specifically on the supply chain that he mentioned. If you could just step back, and I think Rafael probably feels this maybe more directly in the seat that he sits in, this is a large-scale nuclear build-out globally. So as much as we talk about the U.S. because we live here and we're doing a lot of things, it's everywhere. And I need everybody to feel just how big this is. We need all of the supply chain that you can bring to bear in South Korea and then some. So I do agree that there's going to be a significant partnership between the US and South Korea, probably other nations and South Korea. I just came back from India. India is also very much turning to nuclear power as we are trying to get to 400 gigawatts, as you see in those executive orders. India is trying to go from 8 gigawatts to 100 gigawatts in roughly the same time. I think they want to get there by 2048. And we should embrace that India is interested in nuclear and be helpful to them. But I need everybody to feel it's not just that we're building out nuclear, it's that we're building it out everywhere all at once, okay? And so the idea of supply chain and getting it going and getting it building. I was just in Doosan's maybe 6 months ago. I was there in South Korea and saw their fabulous factory. You should be so proud of the technology that you have there and the abilities that you have. But I really just want to give the understanding and appreciation of just sort of how many countries are interested in nuclear, and it could be large, medium, or small. In fact, that's the biggest thing for nuclear right now, is that when we were only large, when we were only gigawatt size, you couldn't be an answer in a remote village. You couldn't be an answer in a very dry place because you needed a large water supply, for your technology. You couldn't be in a lot of different places, and so nuclear was not thought of as a solution set. But now we are large, we are medium, we're really small. All of a sudden, there is a nuclear for you, no matter what it is you're doing. You want to go to outer space, and so you need something very small, there's a nuclear there for you. You want to do something in a very remote place, maybe mining, somebody mentioned, absolutely, there's a nuclear for you. You can have a nuclear that just powers your business, or you can have nuclear, obviously, that powers the grid and take that off of the grid. So I would say the fundamental change that's happened is the fact that there's a tool in the toolkit for a variety of solution sets, and that's all coming to the market literally right now. So when you say, what are we looking at over the next year? Well, we're going to be looking for announcements. There's going to be announcements about large things, there's going to be an announcement about medium things, and there's going to be an announcement about small things. And so I think you're going to begin to see the population of these data sets. What's that going to do? That's going to send a signal to supply chain that says, you know what, we're serious about this. And now people are going to start to understand timelines of how serious and how quick. And it's not going to be, I want one of those or two of those. It's probably going to be more like, I want 10 of those, or I want 5 of those, or I want 5 over there. So that volume sends that signal to supply chain. It also sends that signal to workforce, because there's going to be a lot of workers that are needed, some in factories, because the little ones will get in factories, and the medium size and the larger size are going to be more put together at a site, even if they're modular, put together at a site. So think of construction and mechanics and electricians and boiler makers and welders and all that stuff. Where are we going to get them from? Well, they're going to come from a lot of places. Right now, I would tell you, if you talk to the unions, their apprenticeship membership is at its highest since the 1950s. And why is that? Well, because we're building some things, mostly data centers. So as those data centers get built, we're training electricians and welders and mechanics. Now, when you put out that nuclear project, we're pretty attractive because it takes us a little bit longer to build a nuclear plant than it does a data center. So we have jobs that last longer. We generally pay very well. And so in a bit, we're kind of starting the supply chain on the people side right now by some of the data center build out. We're going to need to continue that. And then, of course, we need 2-year degrees, 4-year degrees. We need sort of all kinds. And so we know that that's coming. We know that we need that labor force. The part that kind of kicks that off goes back to that order book. So I think you're going to see over the next year and the next 2 years a significant change in the order book. So it makes everybody see and feel what's coming. And I think that kicks off supply chain and workforce engagement.
Maria, thank you so much. I think we're all looking forward to those anticipated announcements and to all of the knock-on effects that you mentioned. Rafael, before you spoke a little bit about the Central and Eastern Europe and everything that you're doing in the region. What does success in the region look like to you?
Success in the region is to replace baseload, which will be decommissioned on the massive scale in Central Europe. So just in Poland, we're going to decommission 20 gigawatts of coal-fired plants, and the country will require to have at least more than 20 gigawatts on the beginning of 30s of new baseload. So in this case, success it will be the possibility to build with the fleet approach to build several units on, let's say, 2-3 sites in Poland on the beginning of 30s, because that's a requirement from the market. A great success may be cooperation we already established between countries. We don't believe really in nuclear regulatory harmonization. We are very realistic with this, but this what is feasible is advanced cooperation between regulators and ability to recycle knowledge, documents, information which we already developed. This is what we do. And I believe that it definitely will help to deploy not just in one country but in several countries a fleet of reactors. So from the energy security perspective, I think it's important to understand that all region is already cut from the natural gas from Russia. It's cut from the many countries just don't have any access to the natural gas. You know, Hungary, they don't have a harbor even, so that Czech Republic is in similar situation. So it's really difficult to increase consumption of natural gas for the electricity production. And there is no more coal-fired plants in many countries. Poland is last in the region. And the only solution, it may be nuclear. With the large nuclear projects, it's great, but we don't have that much time. So in the beginning of 30s, it will be incredible situation in Central Europe with the really increasing the energy demand, because there is so much industry. We are going forward with the economy, and really limited supply of electricity. And there is additional factor. It's not only electrons to the grid, it's also about the heat. All Central Europe has a district heating. In case of Poland, we consume 55 gigawatts thermal of, and only Warsaw has 4.6 gigawatt thermal district heating plant. So we need to have more combined heat and power, and to supply even a small part of this, it will be incredible success.
Thank you so much. And I think we're all watching closely and looking forward to announcements coming out of the region as well. Sungyul, you've obviously had tremendous success on the UAE Baraka nuclear power project. Now you're working with the Czech Republic. What are some lessons learned that you would share with newcomer countries?
Okay, I had the privilege to be the member of the bidding team for the Barca project in year 2009, and I've also led bidding team for the Czech Republic for 4.5 years, and so there's the lessons learned. Maybe I have a skepticism in my DNA. So when I was in Barca bidding team, I thought, is it possible to award the deal? And we did it. And is it possible to build it on time and on budget? And we did it. But at that time, I maybe overlooked our experiences. Uh, I mean, the reference plants that I mentioned at the first question, as Seoul Unit 1 and 2, was constructed in parallel with the UA project. So that in that project, not much experience was accumulated, but OPR 1000, which APR 1400 was evolved from, we have 10 units of that nuclear power plant. So we accumulated a lot of experiences. So those experiences is a key to the success. So repetition and maybe fleet approach is the key for the nuclear project. And especially because we need to be in line with LNG or renewables. So reducing the cost of the construction of the nuclear new build is a key for the success. And second one from the Barca project is that comprehensive support is from the government is very essential. Nuclear power project is not just EPC project. It needs a lot of human resource development and regulatory framework and the development of the safety culture and sovereign support, not only just financially, but also for the industry-wide support. So those are main factor for the success of the Baraka project. And third one is we need the industrial support and community support. We awarded Czech Republic, but the Czech Republic already has 6 units of nuclear power plant, Russian type. So they are not familiar with, of course, Korean type nuclear technology, but we try our best to be the part of the ecosystem of the nuclear industry in Czech Republic. We had a partnership with 300 companies in Czech Republic. And for the community support, we sponsored ISAC team, local ISAC team, and we did volunteer activities for the community. So they became a big supporter for the KHMP. And those kind of things, wherever it is a very key factor for the success of the nuclear project.
Sungyul, thank you so much for those lessons learned, and I like your skepticism maybe turning into optimism. And Shenando, I'd like to stay kind of on that same theme. Your report talks about an optimistic nuclear scenario and a pessimistic nuclear scenario, and we have 3 minutes left, so no time for pessimism. What needs to happen? What needs to happen for the optimistic scenario to take place?
I fully agree with you. There is definitely no time for pessimism and only optimism. And so that is actually precisely why Rockefeller partnered with Temasek Trust and Oppenheimer to create the Global Coalition for Nuclear Philanthropy. This is something we announced just a few weeks ago in Singapore, and we're all very excited about. And this is really meant for philanthropy to present a united front so that we can really come together and address this issue of nuclear in the energy space head on. And so what we're hoping to do with the creation of this is to do 4 different things, right? So one is to grow the field. We want to grow the field and make sure that we're including all different players. And I'm just looking at my notes here so I get this right. The second is going to be to build the case, right? To build data-informed, grounded narratives that really make sure to include national priorities and taking into account local context, right? The third is around bankability. I just talked about cost of capital and making sure that we include MDBs. That's going to be absolutely critical for really opening up the pools of capital for making this possible, right? For all of these things possible. And the fourth is around governance and making sure that we have the right institutions setting the right sorts of safety standards, making sure that we have the right policies in place, and again, coordinating all of those kinds of things from the philanthropic side. And so I'm optimistic that by coming together and forming this coalition that we'll be able to accomplish a lot of these things.
Well, thank you so much. It's a wonderful call to action. And I want to thank the four of you for everything that each of you are doing to deploy nuclear generation at scale, at speed. Your work is just incredible. And please join me in thanking our panelists.